They were a name that spread fear across the stars. Every planet they visited had learned quickly that resistance was useless. Massive, armored, and merciless, they crushed anyone who dared oppose them. Their ships darkened the skies like a storm, and their claws, stronger than any human-built weapon, left devastation in their wake. No one had ever tried to understand them. No one had ever tried to speak to them. The universe only knew their name and feared it. On the edge of Prime, a small human ship approached. Its hull was shiny but fragile-looking compared to the vessels that surrounded it. The Odyssey carried no weapons visible to the scanners. The humans aboard could easily be crushed. Yet from inside the ship, Captain walked calmly toward the airlock, unarmed, her uniform simple and her gaze steady. The fleet immediately prepared to attack. Orders to fire were sent, weapons charged, and claws poised for battle, but did not hesitate. She stepped out into the open air, her hands at her sides, and looked at the enormous standing before her. Her voice was soft, but it carried clearly across the tense space. "We come in peace." The words shocked them. They had never heard this tone before. Fear, rage, and submission were the only sounds that had ever come from beings they faced. And yet here was a human, small, fragile, and unarmed, speaking with calm certainty. Her eyes did not flicker with fear. Her shoulders did not tense. She did not run. Instead, she simply stood tall, waiting. They tilted their heads. Something about this human puzzled them. For centuries, their world had been built on power. Strength and terror were the only truths they knew. But this creature, this human, had no strength they could measure. No weapons, no claws, no armor. And yet she radiated a strange kind of confidence. A strange kind of fearlessness. Did not rush them or beg. She did not raise her voice or threaten. She waited patiently as the largest and elder-named stepped forward. His armor gleamed like black stone, his eyes glowed faintly with an inner light, and his claws scraped the metal of the landing platform. "Why are you here, human?" he demanded. His voice was deep, shaking the air with every word. "We wish to talk," replied simply. She tilted her head, smiling faintly. "We do not want to fight. We only want to understand. We want to learn." The snorted, understanding, learning, these were words they did not comprehend. To the weakness had always been the same as surrender, and surrender had always led to death. Yet there was something in the human's voice that made even hesitate. It was not fear that made him pause, it was curiosity, a feeling they had long forgotten. Stepped closer slowly, carefully. She held her hands open, showing she carried nothing. "I know you are feared across the galaxy," she said. "I know no one has ever tried to speak to you before, but maybe it's time someone did." For the first time in centuries, they watched someone approach them without weapons. They did not attack. They did not roar. Their glowing eyes studied her, searching for deception, for fear, for weakness. They found none. Instead, they found calm. They found patience. They found courage that was quiet but undeniable. The humans aboard the Odyssey watched anxiously, their hearts pounding. One wrong move, one mistake, and this first meeting could end in bloodshed. But's calm, measured steps and steady voice held the tension like a tether. They were massive, strong, and frightening. But here was something they had never experienced before, a human who did not fear them. Finally spoke again, slower this time, his claws lowering slightly. "You are small, fragile. How do you stand before us like this?" His voice was almost a whisper. No human had ever stood before him like this. No one had dared to. Smiled faintly. "Because I believe there is something more than fear. I believe there is hope. I believe that even creatures as strong as you can learn something new if someone is willing to try." The wind howled through the landing platform as the humans' words hung in the air. They felt an unfamiliar stirring in their chests. Confusion, curiosity, something close to respect. They did not know it yet, but the arrival of this small human would change their world forever. And it all began with a single choice, to speak instead of fight. Days passed on Prime, but nothing exploded. No weapons fired, no claws struck. The watched the humans carefully as if expecting a trap, but Captain did not act like an invader. She did not shout orders, nor did she flaunt power. Instead, she walked among the, speaking softly, asking questions, and listening more than she spoke. At first, the elders found her strange. Humans were tiny, fragile creatures, incapable of surviving in battles, and yet here she was, smiling, laughing, learning their language, their culture, their customs. They were suspicious. How could someone so small survive without the tools they needed to conquer or defend? How could someone so gentle gain their attention? Did not mind their suspicion, she understood it. Fear was all the new, and yet she continued, slowly building trust. She touched wounded scales with care, helping the injured stand. She shared stories of her home, of oceans, of sunlight, of family. The words seemed strange to them, but in them they felt warmth, something they had not felt in centuries of fear and conquest. One day a young approached her. His claws trembled. His eyes glimmered with uncertainty. He had never spoken to anyone outside his family, and certainly never to a human. Why do you not fear us?" he asked, his voice small, almost a whisper. Knelt to his height, her gaze gentle. "Because fear does not teach," she said. "It only hides the truth, and the truth is you are more than what others say you are. You are capable of kindness, of courage, of change." The words echoed in the child's mind. No one had ever said anything like that to him. He had been taught that the galaxy feared them because they were monsters, and monsters did not deserve kindness. But here was a human offering care without judgment, respect without submission. It felt strange, but it also felt right. Slowly, the elders began to observe more closely. They noticed how treated everyone equally. She laughed at their humor, shared in their struggles, and never demanded obedience. She did not rule them, but her presence commanded respect. Some began to mimic her, speaking with their younger ones in softer tones, treating small disagreements with patience instead of aggression. Introduced small exercises, simple things at first. She asked them to build tools together to teach one another skills without competing. She shared human games which seemed silly to them at first, but they quickly saw the value. Through these activities, the learned cooperation, trust, and even laughter, a sound they had almost forgotten. But not all were pleased. Some warriors, the fiercest and oldest among them, whispered that humans were weak, that teachings were dangerous. "Fear keeps us alive," they said. "Peace will destroy us." Their voices carried tension, even hate. Yet even they could not deny the changes they saw in their kin. The younger were calmer. They hesitated less in decisions. They listened before acting. Something was happening, and it was undeniable. One evening gathered a group of around a small fire-like generator. Its glow illuminated their massive forms, casting long shadows. "Do you know why you are feared?" she asked. The elders looked down, claws tapping nervously on the metal floor. "Because no one understands you. They only see your strength, your anger, your power, but strength without heart is nothing. You can be feared, yes, but you can also be respected. You can be loved. You can choose." The words settled into the minds like seeds planted in soil. They had never thought of choice in this way. Choice had always been dictated by survival, by fear, by orders. But now they could imagine something else. A way of being beyond instinct and aggression. As days became weeks, small changes grew. A laughed without reason. Another hesitated before striking an opponent during training, considering words first. A young warrior asked another to help her, not because she was weak, but because together they could succeed. And always was there, guiding, observing, teaching by example rather than command. The known across the galaxy only for fear were beginning to see something new in themselves. And although they did not yet fully understand it, they felt hope stirring in their hearts. A tiny human had shown them that there was more to life than power, more to strength than claws. She had shown them something dangerous and wonderful, that kindness, trust, and understanding could change even the fiercest of hearts. And in that moment, under the pale light of Prime, the seeds of a new future began to grow. The first real change came quietly, without fanfare or warning. A small incident, almost trivial, began to ripple through the in ways no one had predicted. One evening, as the twin suns of Prime dipped below the horizon, a young named approached. His massive form cast a long shadow, and his claws tapped nervously against the ground. "Human," he began, his voice trembling slightly. I am afraid." Turned to him, her expression soft and encouraging. "Afraid of what?" "The dark," he admitted. "The nights here, they feel endless. I cannot see, I cannot fight." Smiled gently. "You are not alone," she said. "Let me stay with you until you feel safe." The other watched from a distance, confused and silent. They had never seen one of their own show fear so openly, and they had certainly never seen a human respond with patience instead of mockery. Sat beside her, hands calm, and spoke softly. She told him stories of distant lands, of stars, of oceans on her. Slowly, carefully, she painted pictures with her words until the young laughed. A deep, rolling laugh that startled even him. The elders frowned. "This is weakness," one muttered. "Fear should not be indulged." But shook her head. "This is strength," she said. "Strength to face fear, to share it, and to overcome it." Word of the incident spread among the... Whispers passed from one warrior to another. Something impossible was happening, had shown vulnerability, and had been met with kindness, not punishment. Others began to watch more closely. A few older found themselves secretly curious. They had never seen this side of their people before. Over the following days, more small changes occurred. Who had once demanded obedience from their subordinates now listened. They asked questions. They hesitated before striking in training, thinking about consequences. Younglings laughed more freely, and small acts of generosity began to appear. A warrior shared rations with another, a healer offered guidance without expectation. His presence had become a quiet force that reshaped their society. She did not command, she did not demand. She only showed what could be, and the who had been defined by fear began to feel something they had long forgotten: trust. One afternoon approached again, this time carrying a small, crude carving. "I made this for you," he said. It is not perfect, but I wanted to show you I am learning." Sighs softened. "It is beautiful, thank you." Even the elders could not ignore the change. The most skeptical among them watched in silence as his people laughed, shared, and hesitated before fighting. He did not understand fully, but he felt a stirring in his chest, something dangerous and unfamiliar: hope. Not everyone was pleased. Some warriors grumbled, muttering that humans were weak, that these changes would ruin the way. "Fear keeps us alive," they whispered in the dark, but the young ignored them. They were beginning to see a different path, one that did not rely solely on power and intimidation. Continued her lessons in quiet, subtle ways. She taught them games, human stories, songs. She showed them that helping one another did not make them weak. She showed them that courage could exist alongside compassion. Slowly, step by step, they began to believe it. One evening approached privately. "Human," he said, his massive form hunched in a way that suggested respect rather than threat. You have changed something in us. We do not understand it. Perhaps we like it." Smiled gently. "You are capable of much more than fear. You always were. I only showed you the way to see it." For the first time, they realized that their identity, built for centuries on fear, could shift. They could be strong without crushing others. They could be respected without demanding terror. And they could choose to be better if someone was willing to show them how. That night, as the twin moons rose, and a few others gathered around a small fire, they spoke softly, sharing stories, laughing for the first time in decades. They had tasted a new feeling, hope, and it was than any victory they had ever won in battle. The first change was small, quiet, and almost invisible, but it would ripple through generations. A human had shown that fear was not the only way to survive. There was another path, and it began with something far stronger than claws: understanding, compassion, and trust. And though once known only for fear, were starting to learn it. For weeks, the had begun to change. Laughter echoed where silence once ruled, and curiosity replaced blind obedience. But not everyone welcomed this transformation. Some warriors, older and hardened by centuries of conquest, whispered in dark corridors, their voices low and full of anger. They saw as a threat, not a teacher. Fear had been their law, and a human challenging that law was dangerous. One night, under the pale glow of Prime's twin moons, a small group of these dissenters gathered in secret. Their claws scraped the metal floors as they planned. "The human weakens us," one said. "She teaches our young to hesitate. She teaches them compassion. This is not, it is a betrayal." The others nodded, their eyes gleaming with silent fury. They believed that fear had kept thee alive for centuries. They believed its influence would destroy them, and they decided that something had to be done. Meanwhile, continued her quiet lessons. She spent her days walking among the young, listening to their worries and sharing stories of courage and hope. She never forced her teachings, never demanded obedience. And yet, she could feel tension building, like a storm in the distance. Something was coming. That night the storm arrived. The dissenters struck, attempting to capture and remove her influence from their people forever. They moved swiftly, claws sharp, weapons ready. Chaos erupted in the training grounds, shouts and roars echoing through the corridors. The humans aboard the Odyssey scrambled to respond, but the, caught between old loyalty and new curiosity, froze in shock. Did not fight back. She stood in the open, her small human form appearing fragile against the towering warriors. Yet her eyes were steady, her voice calm. "Stop," she said, and even above the shouts her words carried. "You do not need to do this." The attackers hesitated, surprised by her fearlessness. No human had ever stood before them like this. No human had ever spoken with such quiet authority. A strange thing happened. Some of the younger, those who had begun to learn compassion and trust, stepped forward to protect her. Their claws were not raised in anger but in defense. One of the dissenters roared, "You side with a weak human. You betray your own kind." "Yes," said, stepping beside, his massive form trembling with both fear and courage. "Because she has shown us something stronger than fear, something worth protecting." Others followed. Slowly, the tide shifted. Those who had doubted the human's teachings realized that her strength was not in weapons, not in claws, but in her unwavering belief in them. The dissenters, faced with the united front of young and changed, faltered. Spoke again, her voice calm and steady. "You can choose to continue the cycle of fear, or you can choose a new way. The choice is yours, but harming one another will destroy everything you have worked to build." For a long moment, silence fell. The attackers glared at their peers, the younger glared back, and the weight of centuries of tradition hung in the air. Then, slowly, claws lowered, voices softened, and the dissenters retreated into the shadows. They were not defeated by force. They were confronted by something they had never faced before, courage born of understanding. The elders, including, stepped forward after the chaos. Their massive forms towered above, but their voices were quieter, filled with something new, respect. "You have shown us strength we did not know existed," said. "Not the strength of claws or armor, but of heart and mind. We will remember this." Nodded, exhaustion and relief in her eyes. "Remember always," she said softly, "the strongest warriors are those who choose to protect, not destroy." That night they gathered around the fire, their forms tall and solemn. The dissenters had vanished for now, but the lesson had been learned. Fear could no longer dominate their hearts completely. They had seen what compassion, courage, and trust could achieve. Small and human, had survived what could have been her end. Not because she fought harder, not because she was stronger, but because she had taught them something that claws and weapons could never teach. That true power comes from choosing to rise above fear. And in that quiet, dangerous night, they realized that their lives and their souls would never be the same. The calm after the betrayal did not last long. From the edges of the galaxy, a hostile fleet approached Prime. They were ruthless, unyielding, and determined to destroy them before anyone else could stop them. Entire planets had already fallen to their weapons, and Prime was next. The known across the galaxy for fear and terror were suddenly faced with something far more dangerous than humans, an enemy that would not be reasoned with. Panic spread quickly among the warriors. Claws clanged against metal floors. Roars of anger and frustration filled the air. For the first time, they felt helpless. They had prepared for battle, yes, but their confidence was built on fear, fear of others, not courage in themselves. Watched quietly, studying as they scrambled. She knew that this was the true test, the moment where her lessons would either prove themselves or collapse under pressure. She stepped forward, raising her hands not as a surrender, but as a signal of calm. "Listen to me," she called. "This enemy fears no one. If you fight as you always have, relying on anger and instinct, you will fall. But if you fight together, if you trust one another, you can survive." They hesitated. It was easy to fear, easy to lash out. But words stirred something deeper. They remembered the games, the shared stories, the small acts of kindness she had shown them. They remembered laughter, hesitation, and courage that was quiet but undeniable. The young who had first learned to laugh stepped forward. We will try," he said, his voice trembling but firm. Others followed. Slowly, the formation of the shifted. No longer were they driven purely by fear. They moved with purpose, not just instinct. They looked to one another for guidance, not just to dominate. The enemy fleet struck. Explosions shook the planet, metal screamed against metal, and the sky burned with fire and debris. But something miraculous happened. They did not falter. They fought not as conquerors, not as monsters, but as protectors. They moved in coordination, covering one another, anticipating danger and defending those who could not defend themselves. Moved among them unarmed, guiding where she could, encouraging where she needed to. "Together," she shouted, "not because you must, but because you choose to." The enemy faltered. They had faced the before, and they had relied on fear to control their enemies. But these fought differently. They fought with choice, with strategy, with understanding. They protected each other, saving lives that would have been lost in previous battles. Their unity became a force no weapon could break. The elder who had once doubted her teachings roared in triumph as he saved a youngling from a collapsing structure. "Human, you were right," he shouted above the chaos. "Courage is more than strength, trust is more than fear." One by one, the enemy ships began to retreat, unable to overcome the combined will and coordination of they and their human allies. For the first time in centuries, they did not win by terror. They won because they had learned something far more powerful, the strength of choice, of understanding, of unity. When the battle ended, silence fell over the scorched plains of Prime. Fires still burned, smoke hung in the sky, and debris littered the ground. But among something new had taken root. They had faced destruction, and they had survived, not because of fear, but because of courage, compassion, and trust. Stood among them, weary but proud. She did not smile, her heart ached for the loss and chaos of war. But she also knew that this victory was different. This victory had changed them. They had learned that fear was not the only way to survive, and strength could be measured in more than claws and armor. Looked up at her eyes shining. We understand now," he whispered. "Not everything, but enough. You have shown us the way." Nodded. "The way is always your choice. You fought today not because you had to, but because you wanted to protect each other. That is the true mark of strength." And for the first time, the known only for fear across the galaxy realized that their identity could be more. They could be protectors, teachers, friends. They could be stronger than they ever imagined, not through terror, but through choice. The moment of truth had arrived, and they had passed it, The battle was over, but Prime was not the same. Smoke still curled into the sky and debris littered the ground, yet they did not feel the same fear they had carried for centuries. They had survived an enemy far stronger than themselves, not by terror or domination, but by working together. For the first time, they understood something new. Strength without fear could be stronger than fear alone. Walked among the, helping where she could, offering words of encouragement to those who trembled at the memories of the battle. Her presence was calm, steady, and unwavering, as if she carried no weight of her own losses, though her heart felt every scar and every fear. She knelt beside a wounded warrior and whispered, "You are alive. That is the proof that courage works." The elder who had once doubted her teachings now watched the younger tending to one another, sharing rations and helping the injured. His glowing eyes softened as he spoke quietly to, "I did not know this was possible. We have always been feared. Now I see we can be more." Smiled, though faintly. "More than fear," she said. "You can choose your path, you always could, you just didn't see it before." The young warriors who had once laughed and played under her guidance now worked side by side with the elders. They shared knowledge of combat, healing, and strategy, but also of patience, empathy, and trust. The older had learned to listen, not just command, and the younger had learned that strength included protection and care. Even the dissenters, those who had plotted against, were not punished. They were given a choice, to continue old ways or to embrace the new lessons. Many hesitated at first, but watching their people survive and thrive, seeing courage paired with care, they began to understand. Fear had protected them, yes, but compassion had saved them. The council convened, their massive forms surrounding a circle of light from the setting sun. They spoke of her patience, her courage, and her strange human ability to teach without demanding. His voice resonated above the others. "She has shown us that fear is not the only path, that courage can exist alongside compassion, that we can choose more than terror." The words echoed across the chamber. Silence followed, then agreement, then quiet murmurs of hope. Something they had never allowed themselves to feel began to grow in their hearts, pride not in destruction but in protection, pride not in fear but in choice. Watched quietly, her heart swelling with both joy and sorrow. She had taught them the lessons she could, but the rest would belong to them. Their transformation could not be forced, it had to be chosen, and already she could see it happening. Children laughed, not with fear but with delight. Warriors trained, not with the intent to dominate but to improve and support one another. Elders debated, not to prove power, but to find solutions that preserved life and honored their people. Though once known across galaxies only for fear, were beginning to redefine themselves. Turn to who had grown taller, stronger, yet softer in his eyes. "You understand now," she said. "Not everything will be easy, but you have the choice, always the choice." Nodded solemnly. "We understand. You have shown us a way, a better way." Even laid a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of respect and trust. "Human, you have given us something no weapon ever could. You have given us ourselves." The twin moons rose over Prime, casting silver light across the newly awakened planet. For the first time in generations, they did not shiver at the night, did not tremble at their own shadows. They had learned to see each other as more than warriors, more than monsters. They had learned to see themselves as a people capable of change, of compassion, and of choice. Knew her time on Prime was nearing its end. Humans did not stay forever in one place, and her mission had always been temporary. But she also knew that the seeds she had planted would grow. They had seen courage, trust, and hope in action. They had felt it, lived it, and chosen it. And as she prepared to leave, she knew the galaxy would never see thee in the same way again. They would be more than fear. They would be more than war. They would be a force shaped by choice, by understanding, and by the lessons of one human who dared to teach them a new way. The time came for to leave Prime. The humans aboard the Odyssey prepared for departure, but none of them moved as quickly as She walked slowly through the city, her eyes taking in the changes she had helped bring about. Children played freely in the streets, laughing without fear. Warriors trained together, sharing techniques and encouraging one another. Even the elders, once rigid and distant, spoke openly with the younger, listening as much as they commanded. The people who had once been known across the galaxy only for fear were now different. Stronger, yes, but in a way that no weapon could measure. They were more than conquerors, they were protectors. More than monsters, they were a community. And knew that this transformation would not vanish with her departure. It had been chosen, not forced. Approached her holding something small in his massive hands. It was a carving, crude but meaningful, depicting the twin moons over Prime and a human figure standing among. "We made this for you," he said softly, "so we will remember what you taught us." Knelt to his level, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't need to be remembered," she whispered. "I only need you to continue what you've learned. Protect each other, trust each other, and always remember that courage is more than strength. Compassion is more than mercy. And choice is the greatest power you have." The elder who had once doubted her stepped forward. He lowered his massive head to bow slightly, a gesture of respect that had never imagined she would see. "You have changed us," he said. "You have shown us that we can be more than fear. We will not forget you, human. We will not forget your lessons." The other gathered around, forming a circle of gratitude and respect. No words of fear or dominance were spoken. Instead, there was understanding. There was hope. There was the quiet but undeniable pride of a people who had learned something new, something that would endure long after one human had left their world. Rose, her heart heavy but full. She looked at the city one last time, the laughter, the kindness, the unity, and she knew her mission had succeeded. Not through weapons, not through orders, but through example, patience, and belief in their potential. They were no longer defined by fear. They had chosen to be better. As the Odyssey lifted from the surface, the twin sons of Prime, casting long, golden beams across the city, gazed out of the window. She saw warriors helping the young, elders guiding the inexperienced, and children running freely in the streets. They had embraced change, courage, and compassion. And in doing so, they had created a legacy that would last for generations. His voice came from behind her, soft but firm. "Do humans always come and go like this?" he asked. Smiled faintly. "We do, but the change we leave behind, that stays. Every choice you make from now on, every act of courage or compassion will be your own, and that will shape the galaxy more than any weapon ever could." Added, his voice heavy with emotion, "Then we will be guardians of what you taught us. We will honor your lessons by choosing the right path, even when it is hard." As the Odyssey soared into space, they watched in silence. They did not roar. They did not fear. They simply stood together, united, and for the first time, proud not for their power, but for their hearts. Turned to the stars, feeling the pull of her next journey, but she carried the weight of hope in her chest. She had shown the galaxy something powerful, that humanity's true strength was not in domination, not in weapons, not in conquest. It was in teaching others to rise above fear, to embrace courage, and to choose compassion. The twin moons of Prime shone down on the city, reflecting the changed hearts of its people. A new legacy had begun. They would be remembered not for terror, but for bravery, for understanding, and for the choice to be more than what the universe expected of them. And somewhere far above, among the stars, a human smiled, knowing that the universe was a little better because someone had dared to teach, to care, and to believe.